1 in 8 American couples of childbearing age struggle with infertility. We'll talk about that today on this episode of the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast.
Welcome to Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast, where families are equipped to reflect God's redeeming love. And now here are your hosts, Michael Compagna and Jared Lambert.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So glad you decided to tune in to this week's edition of the Marriage and Family Podcast. We are honored today to have Beth and Jason Forbus, who are a big part of the church here at Healing Place. We love having them. Definitely a power couple here in the ministry of Healing Place Church. Jared, tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Well, Jason and Beth Forbus, like you said, just represents another one of the core couples here at Healing Place Church where, without the volunteer leaders and the couples like the Forbus family, we could not fulfill our mission and vision to be a healing place for a hurting world. Jason and Beth are founders of Sarah's Laughter. It's a Christian support for infertility and child loss. And good friends of ours walked with, this specific topic that hits home for me and my wife. We walked through about 6 years of infertility, which eventually led to our adoption, and just been for as big as the struggle was, has been a blessing for us and our family. So great to have Beth and Jason. Beth and Jason, how you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us here.
Doing well.
We appreciate you guys joining us and just speaking into the lives of our listeners, and looking forward to see what God does during this discussion.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. How does infertility affect your faith and your marriage in the Forbus family?
For me, it tested everything I'd ever been taught about God and who He is and how He viewed me. I grew up in a pastor's home, so I had been taught the Word of God all my life, and I had been a Christian since I was just a little bitty girl. But infertility is what tested me and what really drew me into a really true relationship with who God is, because I came face to face with, is God who He really says He is? Does He do what He says He will do? Because it, more than ever before in my life, it became more, I learned how to really seek God through baby hunger more than any other situation in my entire life.
Wow.
For me, the stereotypical male response is to try to fix things, right?
Right.
And I didn't have the toolkit to fix this. And so it was either run to God or run away from God, and we already had a foundation in our faith, and it was an easy call to just turn to Him for help.
So how long you guys been married?
This summer will be 20 years.
20 years married. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the decision to start a family, and then what were some of the indications of infertility I ran into? Tell us real quick about that journey.
The beginning of our story was like everybody else. We got married, and within the first year of our marriage, we decided we wanted to start trying to have a baby. I went to a doctor to be checked out because I wanted everything to be just right. We had done everything just right so far. We went to school first. We got our degrees first. We had jobs. We were doing everything just right, and we thought that would continue. And so everything looked fine. We started trying to have a baby, and nothing happened. And month after month would pass, and there was no positive pregnancy test. The doctor had told me if I had not conceived within 6 months to come back. 6 months to the day, I was back in her office because I was ready for this baby and I did not want to wait. And she started running some blood tests and different preliminary testing done, and I was diagnosed with the first of 3 fertility diseases. Very, very common, probably the most common disease in women is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which was the first diagnosis that I received. And I will never, ever forget that moment. Ever, ever. I remember just before I walked into her office, sitting in that waiting room and thinking, the next few minutes will either change my life or I'll never even remember this minute in 2 weeks. And when she told me I had PCOS, I remember just this fog just falling over me, because all I knew about it at that point was that it was a fertility disease. I thought it meant I would never conceive. I drove to his office, and to Jason's office. And when I walked in his door, when I walked in his office, I fell up against the door, and I started falling to the floor. And he looked at me, because he knew I had a doctor's appointment that day, but he just looked at me and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I looked at him and I said, "I have that," and I couldn't get the word disease out of my mouth. And I just crumpled. And that was the day it started for us. They've done studies where they show that a fertility diagnosis carries the same emotional impact as a diagnosis of cancer.
Wow.
And I fully believe that, because that day, it wasn't just a diagnosis for me. I began to question, have I done something that has angered God so badly that he's going to withhold a baby from me? Has the generational line stopped because my body is failing? I didn't know where we were going to go. I didn't know how intense the treatments would be. I didn't know there were 2 more diagnoses to come. I didn't know the ethical quagmire we were just going to be thrown into with all the treatments. How far do we take this? How far do we push our marriage? How far into these medical procedures do we go? Do we trust God? Do we just give up on a biological child and turn our hearts towards adoption? What do we do? All of that was wrapped up in 4 little letters. It was a profound moment for us. It was hard. So that's how our journey started.
Yeah. So all the plans you have figured and visioned for your family
out the window.
Yeah, after one appointment, out of the window. You know, Jason, you said something earlier that caught my ear. You said you realized that you didn't have the toolbox to fix what was going on.
Right.
Now that you're on this side of it, what did you learn, or what tools were you able to acquire to help walk Beth through that season?
Just a full understanding of that I still don't have the tools.
Yeah.
Really, we just have to, I guess, if I have to say tool, learn to replace, to compensate for incomplete information with faith and trust rather than deduction. Rather than trying to problem solve, just trust that God has the answers that you don't. Right. You know, he has a higher vantage point, an eternal vantage point that we don't have.
And Jason was good about reminding me of that in those moments when I'm falling apart, and the doctor started pumping me full of medications, and the situation we were in was so emotional. And then the medications have a side effect of mood swings.
Oh, wow.
And so I was not a happy woman to live with, And so in those moments when I'm falling apart, and in our support group, when we kind of check in on each other, we'll say, "Are you mad crazy or are you sad crazy?" Because that just fits how you feel in those moments when I was both mad crazy and sad crazy and falling apart. He would remind me of those things. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what we're going to do, but God does. And we're going to have that baby.
Right.
And he was good about reminding me of those things in those moments when I didn't know if I believed that or not.
Right.
Beth, you've alluded earlier, and Jason, you as well, as how your relationship with God had to change and grow through this process. What are some of the specifics about that journey, about just where you were the day before the diagnosis compared to where you are now in regard to your faith walk?
We were still newlyweds, and we got hit with a powerful punch. Infertility taught us early on what to do with a crisis. We were still starry-eyed newlyweds when we got hit with a life-changing situation. We learned how, more than ever before, how to hit our knees and how to persevere when we didn't know the answers, when we didn't know when the end of this problem was going to be. And it also taught us so many communication skills, because we had to sit down and say, "This is how I feel about this. How do you feel about this? What do you think if the doctor says in vitro? Are you willing to take this far? What about frozen embryos?" Those are hard questions to answer, and those are things that you're not ready to think about until you're forced to. Hard ethical questions, and we learned how to not just say, "Oh, we trust God." No, we had to learn how to trust God, and we've taken those skills from that we learned in Infertility's classroom, and boy, we've used them since then too. One of the best things that we learned how to do through those moments is we learned how to say, I don't understand why this is upsetting you, but I know that it is upsetting you. He didn't have to understand why the pink and blue sky threw me into just a puddle, why I just sobbed for 2 hours. That literally happened one day.
Wow.
I saw blue sky and pink clouds, and I cried for like 2 hours, and I couldn't explain why, but I just needed him to know that it did upset me. And it kind of taught us how to do that. You don't have to understand why, but I need you to understand that. That was a breakthrough for us. Mm-hmm. And infertility forced us to learn how to do that. It taught us how to talk to each other. It taught us how to seek God more than we ever had. Hmm. And those are what I call those hidden blessings of infertility.
Wow.
Right. So as you guys are walking through this, I think one of the biggest resources Sarah's Laughter has provided is support, mm-hmm. A support system, both friends, people who are walking through it that can relate. What kind of support systems did you guys have walking through this?
We didn't have much.
Right.
We didn't have much at all.
Zip.
We both have great families, and our families were there. I had a cousin and a friend who both went through infertility. And so the three of us sort of became an informal support group. And that was pretty much it. When I got my first diagnosis, I got online to see what I could find, and everything that I found told me, if you have PCOS, that you won't conceive, and if you do, you're going to lose it anyway. That's all I found. That was it. Mm-hmm. And so there were no support groups that I could find, nothing. And so we had each other, and we had our families. That was it.
Wow. So obviously your own journey has inspired you to begin this ministry with Sarah's Laughter. And how long have y'all been running that organization?
We started in about 2004.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And since then it's grown just
a lot,
exponentially.
Yeah,
I mean,
it really has.
What is the scope of your ministry now? What are you doing now?
There's a lot that we're doing now. We've recently opened our Infertility and Miscarriage Support Center here in Baton Rouge. And so we have a literal place that you can come if you need somebody to talk to, pray with. My background is in counseling, and we can counsel you through those tough moments. At our center, we have multiple support groups that are available to you. A support group for infertility and loss. We also have a support group for the girls that have conceived, and they are going through a pregnancy. But sometimes after a loss or after you've gone through infertility, it's a very anxious time instead of a very exciting time.
Sure. And
so we have our PALE group. PALE stands for Pregnancy, After, Infertility, and Loss. We're very excited about that, and that's a fantastic group for the girls after they've gone through all these things. We actually have an online support group. The last meeting that we had girls from New York City and from Atlanta and Switzerland and the UK all coming together because they didn't have support groups in their area, so we were able to minister to them online. We have infertility devotionals that we send out 5 days a week, and they literally go around the globe. And so we're able to reach out to people from the realization that they have a problem clear through to the resolution of their problem. We're there with them from day one until they're holding that baby in their arms and they're ready to turn back around and volunteer.
Wow.
Yeah. We have several things going on right here in Baton Rouge. We have a big community event next month, 5K, where we're raising awareness in the Baton Rouge area. But we can also support you no matter where you are. No matter where you are on this globe.
Wow. That's good. That's amazing. Jason, if you could take a minute and talk to the men in our audience about what is a man's role if he is in a relationship dealing with infertility, dealing with loss in this way. So many times this is a stereotypically a woman's problem, but obviously it affects men as well. How does a man handle this? How does a man support his wife through this process?
Well, I wish there was a simple cookie-cutter answer for that, but ultimately, as cliche as it sounds, you just have to love your wife. And in the action verb sense, as Beth mentioned earlier, I don't have to understand why she's falling apart. I just need to understand she's falling apart and she needs me. And for me personally, my personality, the whole nurturing, empathy, all the good, positive, soft skills that people look for, those don't come naturally to me. So it's sort of emotionally exhausting. So it's easy to empty yourself, literally, just to have nothing left in the tank when you're supporting your wife, and especially when, they are facing something that is really a primal level, because something that your body is designed to do isn't doing what it was designed to do, reproduce, have a baby. Ultimately an entire system is not working, and it's something that you can't compartmentalize away, because it's always there. And so you have to stay fed spiritually. You have to keep time in the Word. You have to spend time in prayer. Because if you just try to support and try to be there for your spouse without refilling, you're going to run dry. And then when you run dry, you're going to have problems. We know marriages, we know couples that, maybe didn't survive their infertility story. The marriage didn't. It strengthened ours. I compared it to just holding on to each other while the concrete is poured in around you, and just holding on and let it set, because your instinct is, when you're being covered in concrete, is to run. Mm-hmm. I mean, who really looks for heartache? Who embraces emotional valleys? So staying fed, staying full, to help your spouse. And for God, and it's about half and half, actually. It wasn't the case in our story, but sometimes it's the man's issue, not the woman's issue. Mm-hmm. And for those guys, it's doubly hard because we're men, we're shallow, we try not to deal with things. We numb our pain with golf and Cheetos and whatever. But you got to deal with, hey, I have a problem, and I'm supposed to be the man. I'm supposed to, John Wayne riding on the horse, and it's like, wait a minute, am I feeling emasculated by this? Do I tell anybody about this? And so really you have to just let go of your inner control freak, strip away all that pride and that sense of self, and say, this is bigger than me. God, I need you, help. However you express that, however quiet you are, demonstrative, if you seek help, if you suffer in silence, whatever, how you just have to cry out to God and say, I need you. I need your help. This is bigger than me. You're the only way I'm getting through this.
Yeah, that kind of confirms what Brandy and I walked through. I remember there were two turning points in our struggle with infertility. The first point was where, some members here at Healing Place, Julio and Sherry Merlera, had struggled through infertility. So when we had, talked to our friends and pastors about it, they recommended us go, talk with Julio and Sherry. And I remember Julio and Sherry really encouraging and comforting us. And then they prayed over us. And as they were praying over us, it was probably one of the first times I really heard the voice of God, clearly in my spirit. And it's like, the voice of God said, you need to release her to me. So I felt the burden of, providing, protecting, just come off of me. And I was able to, from that point, what I learned to do was, during those times when, the test came back, I knew my role at that point was to create an environment for her to feel safe enough to share her emotions and her feelings and her struggles, to be real, to be honest, and just to let her get that off her heart and get that off her, get that off her mind, just so she can express it, a safe place. So
absolutely
to get the burden off. And I learned this in counseling later. Counselors, Beth, we're not the answer. We lead people to the counselor, the wonderful counselor, the healer. We lead them to Christ. So when, I felt that release when the Holy Spirit, planted that in my heart. I was able to release her, and I was able to guide and direct her to her Heavenly Father. Mm-hmm. So that really confirms and my experience with what we walked through.
Wow. One last question before we close. If you could change your story, your journey, would you?
Not one day of it. When we were walking through it, I hated every minute of it. I cried harder through those years than I've ever cried in my life, and I questioned more than I ever questioned anything. But when I think about that question, would I change anything? Even if God said to me, Beth, I'll give you the same daughter that you have, because God did give us our miracle child. Even if he said, I'll take infertility out of your story and I'll give you this same child, would you do it? I would beg him not to take infertility out of my life because of what he taught me, the sweetness of what he taught me in infertility. I would beg him not to take it away from me. There was a moment in our story when I was at it was the darkest part of our story, when I wasn't sleeping through the night and just didn't know where this was going to go. And God arrested me one day, and I heard him speak to me more clearly than he has ever spoken to me in my life. Kind of the same kind of experience, right, Jared, that you were just talking about. And I felt God speak to me and say, Beth, why do you want this baby? And it was like, well, God, I want this baby because I want to teach a child. I want to be the one to go in and comfort a child, and I want to be the one to, when this child has a nightmare, I want to be the one to go and comfort and let them know everything's going to be okay. And I felt God speak back to me, and he said, Beth, that's what I want for you. I want to be the one to love you, to teach you, to comfort you, to come in the middle of your worst nightmare and let you know everything's going to be okay. And he said to me, he said, Beth, you know how you feel when you see that pregnant woman or a newborn and they have what you want, and that child just won't come to you. It was like God said to me, he said, Beth, that's how I feel when you won't come to me. Mm-hmm. And it changed I changed the way I knew God looked at me. God wanted me as much as I wanted that baby, that he desired that relationship with me with an intensity like I wanted this baby not yet born. And he told me that day, he said, the joy you'll have when your child comes to you is the joy that I have when you come to me. Right. And those are moments I would have never had if we had not walked through infertility together. So no, I would not change not one moment of that story.
And he said, when?
Right. Mm-hmm. When your child comes to you.
And that was a comfort to you.
I call that day my positive pregnancy test.
Right.
Mm. My medical pregnancy test didn't come for a long time, but that day, I call that day my positive pregnancy test because I knew that day we would have a child.
Wow.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about resources, I know again, but let's just kind of review for if somebody's here in the Baton Rouge area, listens to the podcast, mm-hmm. or maybe even a Healing Place church member, or
sure.
How can they get involved? How can they start, get into some of your resources or support? Sure. Email.
All of our resources are on our website. It's sarahs-laughter.com. We have support groups for infertility and loss that meet the first and third Thursdays of each month. Our pregnancy after infertility and loss are on the opposite Thursdays, the second and fourth Thursdays. Next month, we'll be having Baby Steps, which is our infertility awareness 5K. It'll be out at LSU. We'll be running around the lakes and everything's going to be a great route. That day, we're also going to be giving away a $10,000 grant that can be used for infertility treatment or for adoption. We've got a couple other smaller grants, but the big grant will be for $10,000 to help somebody build their family. We're very excited about that. So if you're interested in coming out and just feeling the support of a couple thousand people to get behind you on your infertility journey, do it. It's an amazing thing. You can find out about that at either the Sarah's Laughter website or our Baby Steps 5K website. But the support groups, that's an ongoing thing all the time. Infertility is too hard to walk through by yourself, and the good news is you don't have to. Our daily double portions, that's our devotionals I was talking about. You can find out about that on our website. All you got to do is send us an email, tell us where to send them. We'll get those to you that very next day. So all that is available to you right now.
Once again, www.sarahs-laughter.com.
Yeah, Sarah's with an H.
No, that's right.
Sarah with an H. All right. Well, Forbuses, thank you very much for being here. This has been
Thank you for
wonderful
having us.
conversation.
Thanks for having us.
We love you. Y'all are awesome.
Yeah.
The check's in the mail.
Don't forget to join us next week when we talk with Tommy and Amy Poche about adoption and that process, how it affected their life, their marriage, their relationship with Jesus. You're not going to want to miss it. That's next week on the Healing Place Marriage and Family Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. For more information about Healing Place Church, visit us online at healingplacechurch.org. To stay informed of upcoming events, check us out on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share this podcast with your family and your friends.